first one is, what is your daily, weekly schedule like for your 3-year-old? That's actually a really good question. This is coming from a parent and they want to know what it's like at home with a 3-year-old, because I'm thinking that it's a little chaotic for this particular parent, as it typically is. And so they're trying to figure out what the day should look like. Here's a few things that I would say. First off, you need to establish a routine and stick to the routine. Humans like routines and children are no different. In fact, they feel a lot more comfort and safety in a routine because they know what's next. You have to remember that a child that is of that age, time doesn't make a lot of sense to them. That won't actually happen until around 5, 6, 7 years old. And so children under that age, it's all kind of happenstance, right? So you could say something will happen in 15 minutes, but 15 minutes doesn't mean anything to them. It seems like an eternity, like this thing will happen forever from now. So, but if there is an established routine, you could say, well, this will happen after this thing. And they already know it because it's an established routine. So it gives them a lot of safety and comfort. They don't feel like they're just floating in space of something that may or may not happen sooner or later. So having a daily routine is very important. And I like to talk about like starting from the times of eating and sleeping and then working in the other times. So if you have the eating times as very consistent and the sleeping times very consistent, then you can work in the other things. And then for the adult in the situation, those sleeping and eating times are a great time to maybe work on other things nearby that you might have to do, keeping in mind that you still have to watch the child, especially during the eating portion, because we want to make sure that there's no choking, right? And so that is how I would construct your routine, just being consistent and understanding to work those around the natural rhythms of eating and sleeping, working those daily schedules around the natural rhythms of eating and sleeping. So that's how I would organize your day. The second question, so we got another question from a parent for our Q&A with Melissa Rohan. This question is, how do you teach 2 languages simultaneously? This is actually a really big question, and I'm always happy to get these types of questions because it's something that I'm very proud of and have done a lot of research and a lot of work in. In fact, I just created or wrote a book that's hopefully going to be published in the next month or 2. So I'm very excited about the launch of that. I've also done a couple of workshops on this, free parent workshops. I've done workshops online. You can see a workshop on this on our YouTube channel. It's something that I'm very excited about. So 2 things, when I talk about doing dual language acquisition, I always talk about it with the assumption that this will be in a Montessori environment. So whether it's at home or at school, the assumption is that it'll be Montessori. It'll have the Montessori philosophies and pedagogy and as part of the program. And so I would say, just the quick tips here, especially under the age of 3, the children need to be in a language-rich environment. So if you are living in the United States, in a part of the United States that is extremely English-speaking, then the target language would be this other language. In our case, it would be Spanish, but it could be French, German, Mandarin, whatever is your cup of tea. So that would be the target language. So you have the predominant language and the target language. Because the predominant language is English here, I don't have to worry about creating a language-rich environment in English. I do have to be absolutely intentional of making sure that, in my case, Spanish, the target language, is extremely accessible and available to the child under the age of 3. So I would actually go ahead and have 100% immersion in the target language for a child under the age of 3. Now, a child that's age 3 through 6, we have to keep in mind that because we are in the United States of America and English is the predominant language, we need to set up the child for success. So they do need to learn how to read and write in both the predominant language, and our objective is also to get them to read and write in the target language. So we still want to do an immersion environment. I would say though that it's 80% in the target language and 20% in the predominant language, again because a lot of just existing in this environment would bring us a lot of that English or the predominant language. So, but because we lived here, we do need to make sure that they know how to read and write in that language. So the skill of reading and writing, the skill, not in a particular language, just the skill, is pretty much the same across each language. So if you can learn the skill in the target language, you can easily transition it, relatively speaking, into the predominant language. There are some nuances, whether you're talking about languages in the same, like Latin versus Latin language or Germanic versus Germanic language, or going from a Germanic language to a Latin language, or even more complicated is when you go into languages where the characters are the alphabet, the characters are vastly different. So that those are some things to think of, but the skill of doing that is pretty much the same. So if you do it in the target language, you can relatively easily slide over to the predominant language. Once they are over the age of 6, between the ages of 6 and 12, those elementary years, it gets fun and funny, because I would say the children love jokes, having fun, and games. That's how you get them to really get excited about learning the target language. So we introduce a lot of games in Spanish, a lot of songs in Spanish, a lot of jokes in Spanish, like little punny type jokes. And that's a lot of fun as well. So that's kind of how we handle it there. And then when we get into those middle school or adolescent ages, now we're looking at being very, making sure that working in the target language is very purposeful work. So, and we're keeping in mind that the children at this age are very interested in the humanities and they're very interested in social justice. And so we make sure that they're learning the language in kind of understanding where they are developmentally and meeting them where they are. So that is how we handle learning both of those languages. Yeah, and let me also say this, that in elementary and in adolescence, we like doing a 50-50, English and Spanish, or in whatever your case is with the predominant languages and the target languages, is how I would handle teaching in 2 languages simultaneously. We have another question for our Q&A with Melissa Rohan, and this question is, taking small objects. This is a 4-year-old who, when going shopping with mom, might take small objects and put it in her pocket, and how does the parent respond to this? This is a really interesting thing. So the children in this age are really very interested in small things. It's very sensorial. It's very curious. So there's a reason for their strong interest in these little small things. In fact, we have works with little small objects like this, and we like using it for this age group because it really gets their interest. So they're very interested in these little small objects and items. And at this age, they're not stealing. Like, there's not a malicious motive behind what they're doing. And so you kind of have to be aware of the child you have, right? And give them opportunities where they can explore little things at home in a safe way. And so you're meeting that need of the child. That way, since the need is met, they're less likely to do it at a store or something like that. But if it does come down to it, just immediately, not 2 days later or 3 days later or even 2 or 3 hours later, but as soon as you notice that they've pocketed a small little item, just immediately address it and talk about it and then move on, is how I would handle that. With a child of 4 years old, you kind of need to handle it in the moment. We have another question for our Q&A with Melissa Rohan. This is an interesting one. This one came from one of our parents who was interested in understanding how a student transitions from Montessori in 8th grade to high school. And I actually really love this question because I can understand where it comes from. There is a lot of the population that believes that Montessori is only meant for the youngest children up until the age of 6. And then after that, they have to go to a typical school so that they can excel into their adulthood. And I would say that this is a myth because Dr. Montessori and communities of Montessori followers and practitioners have built on Dr. Montessori's work so that and really takes in the neuroscience that is available now, and it's so beautiful what is out there for the older children. Dr. Montessori specifically talked at length about elementary, and we now have the neuroscience to prove what she's doing, or did, works for the children. And then Dr. Montessori's son, Mario Montessori, really kind of took her work in Erdkinder, which is for the adolescents, and expanded it. And then we've had since then whole conferences of practitioners coming together in neuroscience, doctors coming together to put together the adolescent program to be absolutely superb for that developing brain. And so what we get out of 8th grade going into high schools, we have these children who are supercharged as far as academically. Absolutely. Academically, these children go on to high school and they do so well. One of the things, one of the feedbacks that we get from the families and from the children is that the children have never really learned that they can't do something. They learn, so they're not discouraged at a challenge, right? So they are always challenged here. And so they are very resilient when they come across a challenge, and they work hard and they work at different angles and perspectives, and they try and they problem solve through the challenge that they have before them. And so these children do exceptionally well in high school, and we're so proud of what they've been able to do. Now, I say that there are some things to keep in mind. While the children themselves are probably 2 to 3 grades ahead of their peers academically, you can't really speed up or fast forward or jump ahead when it comes to the social emotional development. That really just occurs based on the time that they are born, and they're on this trajectory that started from conception. And so you can't speed it up. A 14-year-old is a 14-year-old is a 14-year-old, and that's it. And a 15-year-old is a 15-year-old. And so while a lot of these children are really academically prepared to jump right into college, they're not socially prepared. And so that time in high school is extremely important. And so I do want to like stress that. The other thing that I feel compelled to stress is that there is a change. There is a change. So in a Montessori environment, they have so much autonomy over their time and their education. And when they get to high school, it can be a little discouraging to find that that is no longer available to them. But they are very quick to be, they're very resilient, and they figure it out pretty quickly. So things like homework and testing and time management and planning, all of that, those are skills that they get here. And so they can quickly translate those skills to be very successful in high school. So we're very proud of our students that have moved on from middle school here, our adolescent program here at Waterfront Academy, and moved on to the various high schools here in Washington, D.C. And so I hope that helps as far as that transition from a Montessori environment to a typical school. And I look forward to coming back with more Q&As from Melissa Rohan.